Vegas Around Town. This is the show where we go around and talk to interesting people around Las Vegas. Today, my guest is Maggie Jenson, Magnify Maggie, lifestyle, personal coach, health guru. You do it all.
Oh, well, I try.
You try?
Thank you.
Welcome to the podcast. We're going to be talking health, fitness, mindset, and this one is something that it's kind of near and dear for me, sobriety.
Yes.
So let's do high fives first, just to do the energy. I'm glad you're here.
I'm so excited to be here. I know it's cliche, but the pleasure really is all mine. I've been stoked about this.
Yes. Well, we have common friends, and like our circle's pretty like positive and energized, and like we just have good vibes. So it's like, of course I'm gonna contact you. Like I always see you around. I'm like, I should talk to you and get to know you, like other than the internet, right?
I know, we've been pen pals on social media for a while. You've given me a lot of insight on videography and helping my business with social media. So I've always appreciated being able to connect with you.
I love it.
So yeah, here we are.
This is cool. This is exciting. Let's jump into it. Like I got my little notes here, guys, just because I'm so dyslexic and ADD. Here's the first thing I ask is, 785, what's that? You're not Vegas local, right?
Right.
So how did you get here? Like, why Las Vegas? I know your husband's in the military, right?
Yep.
So maybe let us know what's going on with that.
So 785, that's funny you bring that up. Not a lot of people even call that out, but 785 is Kansas area code. I'm a Midwestern girl.
Dang,
So
okay.
I almost wore my Chiefs boots today, but I figured I'd hold back my my
Kansas?
fandom there. But yeah,
Cool.
So I was born in Kansas, but my dad was also military, so I moved around a lot. So when people ask me like, where are you originally from? It's like Kansas, but then they're like, where did you live? And I'm like, well, let me get out the whole list, the whole scroll here. So I definitely moved around a lot as a kid, but then when my husband and I met, it was in Kansas City, Missouri. We fell in love very quickly. He was military and we got married. We moved to Savannah, Georgia.
Okay, I have a lot of friends from Savannah. There's a big art school there called SCAD.
Yes,
Yep.
SCAD is awesome. It's downtown in historical Savannah.
Yeah.
They do a lot to promote the students' art there. Like you can just buy it, and you would never think that a student created it. So
yeah, it's a cool college. So Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri. So let's backtrack real quick. Like your dad what was he, like Air Force?
He was Army, and
my dad was in the Navy. Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. My dad was Army for 23 years, and my grandpa was also Army. Pretty much every man in my family
come from that military background. Interesting.
And
okay.
when I met my husband, I said a military term within like the first 2 minutes that we were discussing, and he was like, hard eye emoji.
Sweet.
I told him he was over explaining something, and I was like, no, I'm tracking, and he was just like
tracking.
Yeah.
I've heard Felicia say that. It's also very common in a camera term when you track someone as a subject.
Yeah.
It's also in graphics that you track like composites and stuff, and so I get it. I think I met your husband. He is also a DJ, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you guys just do it all.
We like to have many different, buckets, things we're working on.
Which, I mean, you have to, All right. So then, so you guys fell in love. And so where were we? Savannah, Georgia?
From Kansas City to Savannah. And Savannah, if nobody in your audience has ever been, it's what I call like the old-fashioned Southern Las Vegas. It's like one of the only other places other than Bourbon Street, I think, in America that you can walk down like River Street, and they have the drinks and they have the tours. It's just so historical and like touristy, fun at the same time. We were there for 3 years, and we actually moved to Vegas summer of 2020, so mid-COVID, everything.
You just moved here a couple years ago?
Yeah.
I thought you've been here for a while.
Yeah, well, thanks.
So you're a newbie.
I feel like it. I don't have to use maps everywhere I go anymore, so I feel like I am a local.
It's a grid, though. I mean, it's a square. You can't really get lost.
It is smart like that. When I was in Savannah, I thought like everything, all of the major roads were windy. I was so disoriented. I felt like I needed a compass at all times.
It's kind of like that in LA. I lived in LA for a long time, but so do you like look at the strat as your compass?
I do, and I've gotten to the point now where I can it sounds weird, but I can kind of tell like the mountain ranges, which way, you know, like,
sure.
oh, that's west because I can tell that mountain point. Like, it sounds very maybe Girl Scouty, but.
So Midwest is the terrain different? Like, I've never been in the Midwest. I'm kind of afraid to.
Bless your heart.
So
yes, the Midwest, Kansas specifically, is the Great Plains. So flat.
Just nothing.
Nothing. My husband laughs at me because I'm so taken aback by the mountains. And I'm like, well, I've just never really lived around them. The other places that my dad was stationed where we went was North Carolina. A lot like Savannah, Georgia, just kind of swampy and hot.
Wow.
And some of the beaches there. Humid, yeah. So I had never really lived around the mountains, and when we moved here, I was just so in love with the landscape, and that's kind of how I use my landmarks, like I mentioned, is the mountains. I'm in love with them.
Yeah. So from Savannah, you went to Las Vegas, and then is it because your husband got stationed at Creech or Nellis?
Yes, Nellis. Okay. So my husband's
He's
Army.
In the Air Force. Oh,
he's Army, but he's attached to like a very small team here at Nellis. And he teaches what's called the Joint Fire Powers course. I might have gotten one of those words mixed up, but shout out, babe. Hopefully I got it right. Basically, he teaches how to integrate the Army artillery with Air Force pilots. And so he runs courses out here. He has a great, awesome schedule now. It's a little bit easier on him.
How did you guys adjust from humidity, no mountains, and just a different weather? Like, do you like it?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah?
Yeah. I internally hope that we can retire here. If my husband has the opportunity to move up and take command, we will do that. But inside, I'm like, oh, I love Vegas so much. Right. I love the dry heat. I love the scenery. Everything outside of the Strip. I know your other podcast guests have mentioned that too. It's just a lot of people take it for granted. They don't even realize what's outside of the Strip. I
just call it the sleeper city, and I always say it. It's just like you don't like it until you live in it, and kind of. It's a weird. I can't even describe it. It's just like you get your life back in time, right? Yeah. I think it's an efficient city, and I always say it's an efficient city. And the people that you always like coming from LA. Like it kind of has like a small town feel.
I also
it's like a big city, right? It's like everyone's super stoked that you come to their local business, and everyone's just kind of friendlier. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
We're in LA. It's very little. I don't know if you've been to LA, but it's different.
Yeah, it's definitely a different culture. And coming from the Midwest, where they've actually done like interpersonal studies of happiness and kindness tests. Everybody in the Midwest is very genuine and caring, and they ask, how are you? And they care what your response is. And there's been other places that I live where I felt almost just like sad, like there was no human connection. And when I got here, I was like, this feels like Kansas people. Just so sweet and caring and genuine.
Well, the military is it's a tight-knit community anyway. Absolutely. And like you know, obviously like your circle of friends are pretty like close, with like Felicia and them, and like you guys all support each other, and everybody supports everyone's business too, right? Like everybody gives each other work, so it's kind of a cool little vibe that Vegas has. Yeah, I like that, and I personally think that's what makes me like it a lot and live here and want to keep living here, because I see that people come from different parts of the country and they're all supporting each other, because you can, it's like you're able to kind of support your friend because, cost of living isn't as crazy.
Yeah. And it's a place where there is so much variety. It's not just Applebee's. It's not just, Walmart. Yeah. There's so many unique places to go. Yeah. And so once you start to say, you know what, I'm going to try something new. My husband and I joke, like we could try something new, whether that's clothes shopping, food, restaurants, coffee shops. We could try something new every single day.
I forget that the Strip is there too. Yeah. Like I forget, like
even off Strip. Yeah.
Well, no, sometimes you're like, all right, you do your own routine, and then I realize I go to the Strip. I was just by the Strip yesterday, and I'm like, oh, I forgot I live in this like city, and I have all these other options that if I wanted to go big, I could. It's like, me and my business partner, we just started doing lunches at the Cosmo, and there's that little lunch place that it's got like all these cool restaurants that you can kind of go around. There's like Japanese food, there's sushi, there's like donuts. I'm like, this is a cool vibe. It's got like this Alice in Wonderland type of.
I've had the sushi there.
You're talking about? Nice. I don't know what it's called, but it's like at the Cosmo upstairs, and it's like
you can
a lot of locals go there
from it. The Chandelier Bar. Excuse me.
And I'm like, I forget. Like Vegas is right. Like the Strip is right there.
So cool.
Yeah, it's cool, and then you can just not see it forever. Like I'll go like months without
even thinking about it, like kind of forgetting that it's even there.
For sure. Yeah. Let's talk about food and health, right? Because you're a big food and health person.
Absolutely.
Have you been like that? Coming from the Midwest, and I don't know what your upbringing was, but for me, that was never a thing that we focused on. Yeah. You know, like I think my parents just like I'm Filipino, so they made Filipino food growing up, and then like fast food was a thing back in the 80s and 90s. I'm 42, so like that's that fast food boom that happened here in LA, and then when we moved to the Philippines, there was a fast food boom that happened there too from the West coming in. Yeah, you know, so we kind of grew up on that stuff, and my parents worked a lot too, so they were, you know, they don't really focus on nutrition and health, and I don't think they knew. Right. So growing up, was that something you guys, you're judging from your laugh, like you're like, no. So how was that growing up with like, cause you're like one of the healthiest person I can see on Instagram and social and stuff. I'm pretty healthy too, but
we bond over that. Yeah. We nerd out over that.
So talk about that, like food and health and how you got into that whole vibe.
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned, the men in my family were all military, and it wasn't always my dad alone raising me. So when he was deployed, I lived with my grandparents. But just because they're military and they're fit, they're not always taught the right things about nutrition. So a lot of the times, if we did have home-cooked meals, you know, it's kind of standard, like breakfast was eggs and bacon, but for the most part, it was like cereal, you know, 90s. I'm a 90s kid, so cereal.
Yeah, cereal, like sugary, like it's literally sugar in a bowl. Yeah.
My grandpa used to love to take us to McDonald's and Sonic. I kind of only knew how to make like PB&Js through my teenage years. I would eat like frozen egg rolls. So I never really understood the power of nutrition. And even in like education system, they teach you the food pyramid, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was very athletic because of the military kind of culture in my family. But I never knew how to actually eat right for what I was doing. So when I was in college was when I started to, you know, go to the gym on my own, and I was working at a job where I had to pay attention to my image, and we can get into that, but I really wanted to take pride in my fitness and my athleticism, and I started to just kind of self-study, and that's when Instagram started to boom as well, so I would find like resources, coaches that were out there that were putting out like nutrition guides, and I started to just self-study, and I really take pride in the fact that I remain curious. So I always kept trying to learn more, always tried to experiment with myself. And that's where I really learned the most, even before I got, you know, into the coursework and the professional certifications for nutrition.
Yeah. Like, so did you just go on the internet and just kind of figure out what to listen to? Did you try a couple diets? It's like, was it just trial and error?
It is. And that's
I've done that too. I've kind of been through, I just want to know. I'm more curious. And then I got sick and then I had to do it. But like, what was it primarily just because of the job? You're just like, I got to look the part sort of thing? Were you an actress? What would you do?
That's interesting that was the thought. I was a Hooters girl for 10 years, but I kind of worked myself up.
I saw that on your Facebook. Yeah.
I worked myself up through the company. From Topeka, Kansas, I moved to Kansas City. That's where I met Brian, and I kept just excelling and eventually became calendar girl. I was in pageants and Hooters Girl of the Year. And,
no way.
And part of the image is that you have to maintain this athletic cheerleader physique. And I was always thin, but I wasn't athletic looking. I would actually kind of get made fun of. People would say, you need to eat a burger. You are so skinny. They'd say, you have no butt. They would call me pancake because I had no behind. And let me say that sometimes the mean things that people say to you fuel the fire, you know? And so that really got me into wanting to change. If I didn't like something about myself, I was the type of person that like, hey, I'm going to take the initiative to learn. And so... Was
that just something that you always, just because of the military background, was your dad very strict and like, you know, like routine? Like, was that something he did, like instilled in you? Was like the routine, discipline, and like
routine, discipline, work ethic. If you're feeling anything except for happy, like you need to do something about it. You need to do, he would say like, oh, you're acting real angsty today. You need to do some push-ups or go for a walk or, you know, oh, you're not feeling well, drink water. Like,
do something about it.
Those 3 pieces of advice have gotten me so far in life.
Just do something about it.
Do something about it. Yeah. And so it really taught me from a young age of like, you have control, but there were times that I definitely lost sight of that, or got like over controlling with my nutrition. I tried all of the things like you mentioned, like testing, experimenting, and I got to the point where a lot of times I wasn't probably fun to hang out with because I was trying to control so many aspects of food and everything. So you can definitely take it too far.
It's hard. It's also hard to like know what your body will respond to, right? Because I think one of my notes is like, nutrition is like catered differently towards different body types and different like the way your genetics and stuff like that. Because I do a lot of research too, and you don't realize some diets work for some people or some exercises work for different people. So it's just no, I feel you on that. I tried a couple things as far as like the low carb. I fast. I know you don't like the fasting thing, but it works for me. It totally works for me.
Like, if it works for you.
Because I had like gut issues, you know what I mean? So let's talk about some of that stuff though. Let's talk about the diets that you think that, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, as long as you're okay with any of your listeners coming at us with like,
I don't care. I don't have that many listeners. Tell me what do you recommend as far as like health and diet and all that stuff? Like,
So with my clients and with my approach, it's not just me, but what I find to be very successful is the 80-20 kind of ratio of how often that you're really focusing on supportive foods to how often you're treating yourself. And within that 80%.
What do you mean treating yourself though?
So letting yourself have that
gotcha,
McDonald's.
like cheat days.
Yep. I try not to say cheat days. I say treat days.
Treat days.
Yeah, because you're rewarding yourself for hard work and for sticking to the plan 80% of the time. Makes that 20% treat feel a whole lot more fun.
So what's that ratio in the week? Is it a weekly ratio or is it like a monthly ratio?
It's kind of like monthly, so, or you could break it down weekly. So if you are having 3 meals a day and 2 snacks a day, within that, there are 6 opportunities to treat yourself. So that snack treat could be a cookie. That meal treat could be, not going too overboard.
If my stomach starts growling on the podcast, it's because I've fasted for 24 hours.
And you're like, man, I'm ready for a cookie.
I'm actually good. This is like the longest, by accident, because I was just doing a bunch of stuff. This is the longest I've fasted.
I've heard that 24 the longer hours. You fast, you're more
your brain
turns off.
It does, your brain starts to get crazy. Like in a good way. All right, you go ahead.
No, it's okay. So basically,
80-20 is the ratio you're recommending. If you're working out, if you're eating 3 times a day, you can have 2 snacks. Two, what do you call them? Treat days?
Treats.
Oh, treats. Yeah.
So if you're eating 3 times a day with 2 snacks, basically 6 times during 1 week, you can treat yourself.
Got it.
And just without going like super overboard, but you don't really have to be that anal about it, honestly. You start to become very intuitive with it because you're eating so supportively, and your palate changes, you're not really craving all of the junk food that people typically turn to. So it's really like cutting out the processed stuff and going with more whole foods.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So like the reason why, I feel like, my diet changed is I cut out sugar. You know, like that was a huge one for me. Like this processed sugar, the high fructose corn syrup, right? Like all that stuff's everywhere.
Yeah.
That's like in ketchup even, you know? Like,
did you cut out fruit as well? And like natural occurring
I actually
sugars?
have like started scaling down on fruit, you know? It's just 'cause I think for me it's a little different because I had gut issues,
right?
So I had to kind of like
You're a special case.
I went down to like just almonds and eggs like in a day just because I didn't know what I had like bad allergies, so I didn't know what was causing it.
Yeah, well, I'm proud of you for incorporating eggs and protein because that's typically what people forget about. We're all so obsessed with fats and carbs. And we just forget about the macronutrient that's really going to help us out the most.
Well, isn't protein like the best, probably the most important one because it builds like brains and
it builds your muscles. It does so much, so many important things. And there's all of these societal norms now that kind of take our focus off of protein. They say, you know, focus on your fat and carb intake, when the science actually shows that if you are maintaining your calorie intake, whether that be maintenance or deficit, and you're hitting your protein, it really doesn't matter what you do with your carbs and your fats. Yeah,
as long as you're under your caloric intake.
And
what is that? Is that based on? So, like, I don't explain to the audience what that is. Like, you're a person, a human being, is allowed to have a certain amount of calories, right? If it's either you're over, you're under, right? And that kind of dictates like weight gain and weight loss. Am I right?
Yes, but there is absolutely nobody whose calorie intake is the same as somebody else's.
Gotcha. It's
based on a little bit of genetics, but not as much as what people think. A lot of people think that their metabolism is only genetics or only age, and it's not. That's not the full truth. So it's based off of your genetics, like I said, but then your lifestyle. So how active you are. Outside of your exercise, how active are you? So cool if you go to the gym for an hour a day, but then if you're sitting on your behind for the other 23 hours, you're not getting much out of what's called your NEAT, non-exercise activity.
And that's almost as important, right?
That's actually the largest area that you burn calories that you can control outside of just laying.
That's crazy because I don't really work out a ton, but I move active. Like my rings are up and my stands are like 16-hour stands moving like, and my exercise is like 20 minutes of exercise. That's a exercise day. Usually it's like 10.
That's
I'll do like push-ups, pull-ups, and then I'll punch, you know, but like my movement and like everything else is up. It's probably why.
That's what I would suggest way more than somebody that's like, well, I'm going to go to the gym and kill myself and have this intense workout for 2 hours. But then, you know, because I work at a desk or something, you know, we all have these reasons. Because I work at a desk, well, I can't walk around at all and I can't move. They're not finding the opportunities to do so. So I would honestly say the healthier way is to live the lifestyle.
What does that
yours.
do? It just keeps you like your metabolism just going the whole day, and you're just like burning
Think about
calories the whole time.
This bag of bones here. Like to sit here, the calories that I'm burning are really just to run my internal organs, run my automatic systems inside. Once I start moving, though, my body, my muscles have to support my skeleton. So that's where the majority of your calorie burn is going to come from, just simply moving.
Just you standing there supporting yourself.
And what a lot of people think is like, oh, well, I can't work out, so I can't do anything. But it's the opposite. It's if you do a lot, if you're on your feet, just like you said, then your workout, you could find a lot of great results with recompositioning your body with just 20 to 30 minutes of exercise. That doesn't even need to include equipment. If you're active enough in your daily life, your workouts could be push-ups, just calisthenics, you know?
Yeah, push-ups, pull-ups. I always, what do you call that? Body weight workout? What is
body
that?
weight or calisthenics,
Calisthenics. And then, you know, I'll do like kicking and punching and like weights and stuff. But it's never like, I guess I'm so ADD, I can't sit in a gym for 40 minutes. I can do like 5-minute like spurts, right?
Yeah.
Circuit training. I don't know what it's called. That's interesting to hear though. Like most people don't, I guess they, you know, I was talking to a friend and they're like, well, I don't have time to work out. But I'm like, well, you're there's a floor, you can do push-ups, you know,
Right.
like you don't have to like, again, have a gym membership to do it, you know? So like going into your program, right? Like, can you talk about, is it Magnify Maggie is the program? Is that the name of the business?
Well, my business is named Magnify Progressive Wellness.
Okay.
But on social, you find me at Magnify Maggie. That's kind of like the tagline. And so the program itself, I just call them the Magnify Method because I have a few different pillars that I adjust based on where my client is and what they need most. But for the most part, a lot of it is myth busting.
Cool.
A
Yeah,
lot
that makes
of it
sense.
is just, you know, knocking down and what I say, like dehypnotizing you from the beliefs that are drilled into our brain by magazine covers,
Sure.
by celebrities, by celebrity trainers,
Yep.
by other nutritionists and even doctors that should be these professionals and these leaders that are actually spreading misinformation. So,
And by myth busting, like, are you saying like, you know, back in the 80s, there was like a whole thing about trans fat and like, you know, eggs were bad for you and then they were good for you. Like you didn't know what to listen to.
Yep.
And a lot of that comes from just advertising. And just
advertising,
pushing certain
marketing,
products and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. One of the major myths that I like to, well, there's so many, but one of them is about dietary cholesterol. So people will cut out egg yolks entirely. Even doctors will suggest this. But this is based off of what's called and known in the nutrition world as the 7-year study, or I'm sorry, the 7-country study, where I think it was in the 70s or 80s, they studied dietary cholesterol. So if your cholesterol was high because of food, they were trying to study that. They studied 40-something countries.
What causes, this is a stupid question, what causes high cholesterol?
We're going to get there.
Okay.
That's a great question. Yeah. There's a lot of factors, but for a long time, people were going to go back to this study and say that it's food. It's not necessarily always food. It's food paired with lifestyle, paired with excess fat, excess adiposity is like the term. But basically, they took this study of 40 countries. Out of 40 countries, 7 of them, the data correlated with what their narrative said. So they ignored the other countries, which was actually the majority of the data. They took the data that correlated with high cholesterol is from your diet, and they blew it up. And they made egg yolks bad. They made red meat bad. When it's not that being the issue, it's what else are you doing? Are you only eating high sodium diet without vegetables and sitting on your butt for 23 hours a day? Or are you eating eggs but also having spinach and having leafy greens and micronutrients from fruit and nuts and seeds? All of these different things will play. So
the study basically demythed that or debunked it, that cholesterol was causing this.
The study itself, out of the 40 countries, the data overall said high cholesterol, bad cholesterol is not necessarily just from diet.
But there's all these other factors basically.
Exactly. But out of those 40 countries, there were 7 countries that that data did conclude the same thing that the studiers wanted to say. They wanted to.
So okay, all right. So then, how do you treat? How do you know when you take on a client? Let's say, hey, this is me. What's the first conversation you have with them?
Usually,
like let's say I'm gonna, I call you up. I heard you're a fitness trainer, lifestyle guru. What's that conversation look like?
So I basically just need to know where that client is as far as what are they struggling with. Because like I said, I have a lot of pillars and a lot of them come down to mindset in order for the nutrition and the fitness. And, if it's harm reduction / sobriety that we're going to get into later, we got to tackle that part first. And so I just ask a lot of questions. I kind of think about it as like making a friend, you want to get to know them and make sure that they're comfortable sharing these things with you because
they're sensitive topics, right?
Sensitive topics, things that people don't like to admit to or, tell
or they haven't
publicly.
Even like understood themselves, right?
Exactly.
Like a lot of people have that problem to admit like, oh, I do have a problem with this and that, or being self-aware about certain habits.
Being self-aware about the fact that they don't know everything.
For sure.
You know, that's a punch in the gut.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's like almost like, that's like a psychological like hurdle that you kind of have to tiptoe around and be super mindful of. Right.
So a lot of my coursework that I did was in response to that. I saw this need for like psychology and philosophy to be intertwined. And so I became a behavior change specialist as well. So that really studies kind of the psychology around how to approach behavior change. And that's helped me a lot. That's where that first pillar is now, like mindset. We got to make sure you know who you are, you know what path you want to go on, and you're willing to like learn new things.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, I think behavior is like, it's an interesting thing, especially like, you know, maybe we can kind of segue into the sobriety part, but like, you know, for me, like I'm maybe 8 years, I got probably 9 years sober, and behavior was the behavior change was like something that I couldn't, like first acknowledge and then like, then learn how to drive in a different direction. If I'm making any sense at all.
No, it does. Yeah.
So it's like, I don't even know how you would teach that without going to therapy or you know, a psychiatrist. But like for me, it took like a long time to get that change and to be sober. It was like, I was probably drinking since I was 15 and I didn't get sober till 33. So
that's about the same time
that's a lot of reverse engineering or like skewing differently how to, you know, you're reaching for one thing and you're like so used to reaching for one thing. How do you slap your own wrist and go, hey, don't do that? Like, that's like I don't even know how I did that. You know what I mean? It's like, I think my body just caved in and said, you can't do this anymore. We're going to black you out. I think I was blacking out and I was forced to stop. So behavioral change in like food, routine, health, fitness, drinking, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit, but how do you go around that with people? Like, again, right? You're making a friend,
right?
But how do you eventually like get to that conversation? Is this like multiple sessions? Is this months of like reworking your brain? You're essentially rewiring somebody's brain.
Reprogramming, reconditioning.
Yeah, and they have to be open to that too as well, for sure. So how do you get into that that realm? Like, and maybe you can even frame it like your story for sobriety and how you were able to change yourself, and then now having to change other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I get very excited to talk about this because I think it's something that needs to be discussed in, just like nutrition, it needs to be discussed more in school systems, and that's mindfulness. Like you kind of just described something. I got so excited because I wanted to just burst into the conversation, but you described
I was kind of just making stuff up and trying to not trip over my words.
No, you were great. You described how you just were automatically doing things, and that habitual behavior is a program. And so for me, and I think this is for anybody that successfully finds happiness that leads to sobriety or, you know, at least harm reduction, drinking less, it really does come down to reprogramming and understanding your thoughts. And this is something that as a society and as individuals, we don't know automatically to tap into our thoughts. A lot of my clients, when I first start working with them, I ask them to do a thought audit.
A thought audit.
And they don't realize the things that they're telling themselves, and I didn't either. So to kind of take it back, you mentioned you started drinking when you were 15. And then you drank until 33. I was
there was on and off.
Yeah,
on and off. But I think it got like pretty bad in, I was gonna say like 26 through like 33. It was like that was like the dark time.
The dark time, yeah. My timeline was about the same. I started when I was 13. I got real heavy into it when I was 16, 17. My dark time was like 20 to 26. But
yeah, that's a long time to drink.
Yeah,
you know?
and it, kind of like you, in all of those years, like there were spurts where I could go for 3 weeks maybe, but it was very forced. It was white knuckling my way through it. And in hindsight, I know it's because of the things that I was programmed to believe about myself. And this is something that is somewhat of a new approach, and I recognize that it's very polarizing from the traditional protocol. I work in and am involved in several traditional recovery rooms where I observe the dialogue. I was also raised with an alcoholic mother, so I went to AA. I knew the steps. I know the whole spiel. And believing that addiction was a disease, believing that I was powerless to alcohol, always led me to go back to alcohol.
Oh, wow.
And so it was when I was 28, after a bunch of embarrassing and even like trouble with the law, trouble with Hooters, with my job. After all these repercussions with alcohol, it was one thing that happened at a wedding where I yelled at my husband, drunk, that caused me to step back and say, I need to do things different. So I started, it was a month before.
Was your wedding?
No.
Okay.
No, it was a wedding,
okay.
A friend's wedding.
Was your husband also drinking during that time?
Yes, my husband is a very normal drinker, like
he has responsibility.
Healthy. Right, yeah.
He's responsible.
I always used to say he was lame or boring, but in all actuality, he was normal. He can have a drink and then switch to water and be fine. So I remember it was a month before quarantine. It was February 2020. And I just said, I need to do things different. And I started to take a look at like what I was thinking about. And what I was thinking was, well, my mom's a drunk. I'm a drunk. It's genetic. Once you're an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. It always led me to drink more. And what actually started to work was I said, you know what? I'm going to start really focusing on my workouts. I'm going to focus on my nutrition in a way that I had never done before. I started to track it. I started to, within fitness, do what's called progressive overload, where you're not just doing random workouts, but you're repeating and you're tracking your metrics. And
you're measuring it basically.
Exactly.
Like just kind of
squat, 135 pounds for 8 reps for 4 sets. Next day, squat, maybe 5 pounds heavier for 1 extra rep. So
whereas before you weren't doing that?
No, I wasn't doing it. I was just kind of walking into the gym and I'd do some random stuff and whatever machine was open. I thought, you know, it was good for my body to move and do those things, but I was never actually progressing. So I wasn't getting the results. I wasn't believing in the time that I was spending there. And then I'd leave and I'd go drink.
Okay. Yep.
So I said, you know what? I'm going to start really fueling my body the right way. And I got very, very, I engulfed myself and immersed myself in personal development.
How bad was it? Can we talk about what was a bad night of drinking?
Oh, well, my other identity is party girl Maggie. I am a woohoo girl. I say I was. I'm not anymore.
I think I'm a woo guy.
Yeah,
woo.
Woo.
Yeah, I do that.
I do it.
That's
now,
like a generational
normal,
thing. Yeah, I get it.
But I would drink hard alcohol. I loved shots, and I also loved martinis and old fashions, things like that.
Yep.
So basically, double drinks and shots. I would probably consume on average 10 ounces of hard liquor when I would drink. If it was a party mode, like party mode, probably 20, 25 ounces of hard liquor.
Damn, that's pretty much my thing too. Mm-hmm. I would do like a shot of tequila and chase it with a Jameson neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you imagine that? So do you crave it at all? Like, cause I don't crave it at all. Since I stopped, I have like zero craving, and I quit, I quit cold turkey, but I tried to quit like years, right? Like I tried to quit over and over, it just fail, and I would get worse because I would hate myself because I couldn't stop, you know?
Right.
But the day I quit was, I think I had like 20 drinks the night before. I don't even remember how I got home. It was one of those like, I'm over it. And I ended up just leaving because I lived by a bar. I like walking distance by a bar. So that day I kind of told my roommate I'm moving out, and
good for you.
Painted for a year and like locked myself up in an apartment and just like
immerse
nobody's
yourself
talking
in
to me.
Something else.
Yep. And that's how I kind of quit. And I don't crave it, but it did take me a while to get to be able to hang out with people in a bar, like maybe a year
be
or
in that
two.
setting.
Yeah, it took me maybe 2 years after, like 3 years sober, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put myself in that scenario and test myself to see if I can actually do this. And I'm totally fine. So are you able to hang out with people in that scene, in that party scene? Like, are you
Well, here's
tempted?
the thing. I'm going to explain something that I'm also probably going to. I'm going to probably anger some people with this, but it's an idea, it's a theory, and something that I'm working on with a lot of people in the recovery space is that recovery and sobriety doesn't always have to be permanent. It can be something that occurs for a few months and you can get better. So what I did was I went for about 10 months during quarantine, intense internal work. This behavior change that I'm talking about, and we can get into a lot of it.
But how did you do that? You were just like, is this self-imposed?
Yes.
Just like you put rules for yourself? Like your husband wasn't like, yo, you need to do this. And
no. He was totally just supportive. I think that's a big part of anybody trying to get healthy. Their circle needs to be like their positivity mastermind, not like, oh, you need to do this, you're a failure.
And it has to come from you though, right?
It
like
does.
It definitely does. It's not going to work if
anything
it
you do in life, you have to believe and you have to want it and you have to create a self-image around it. So basically, I can imbibe, I can have a drink, and I don't have cravings. I do it on my terms. If it's a celebration, if it's a wedding, it never has turned out like that other wedding either.
So you've actually gone back and like, now that you rewired your brain, you're like, I'm gonna have a drink, but not 20.
And it's a totally different experience.
That's interesting.
I look at it and it's not alluring. I actually look at it and I think that's going to make me feel like crap. That's going to get in the way of my productivity. Completely different internal dialogue. And it has to do a lot with me, at least, and psychologically with most people, has to do with your self-image. You're never going to outwork your self-image, and your mind is going to
That's good though.
Go to work. Yeah. It's going to go to work to create a reality based off of who you think you are. If you tell yourself you're powerless, your mind is going to make you feel powerless.
And that's cool, because I know we're jumping around a little bit here, but like you're talking more so about the mindset, about how you converse with yourself, right? Like those because the funny thing is you're with yourself more than anyone else. So if you're talking bad or you're thinking bad or you're doing bad things, then that's pretty much you, right? Like, yeah, that's huge. That's pretty, that's deep.
I know, I knew, and I was like trying to debate how in depth we would get, but I have kind of an idea that really stuck with me was when you're kind of following, and the traditional mindset of an addict is negativity space. And then you're following a traditional protocol, like admitting that you're powerless, going back and admitting fault to people that you've hurt, really dredging up past failures. You're putting yourself in a very negative place, a negative frequency. There can be no intelligent action or decision coming from a negative frequency. Your energy that you have within you,
100% agree.
Your energy that you have within you is going to be whatever you create externally. So for me, always trying to go cold turkey, it does work for some people because they can put themselves in a happy place. But for me, being reminded of all of my failures, saying that I'm powerless, that put me in a place where I was still making bad decisions.
Well, why did you talk to yourself that way, you think?
Oh, I was programmed through trauma.
Yeah. A lot of that. There we go.
There it is.
Yep.
There's a doctor that I study a lot, and I look up to him, Dr. Gabor Mate. He says, ask not why the addiction, but why the pain. Once you heal the pain, the addiction's gone. And he says addiction is not a disease. And
where did people get that though? Like, where did I hear that. I don't believe it. But what media again? Like advertising? Some doctor freaking just said it?
Yeah, AA. It came from AA. AA and the 12 steps were written in the 1930s. They
say that addiction is like
an incurable disease.
It's a disease.
You are powerless. And it has worked for so many people. And anybody in your audience that has found happiness, and I'm not just saying sobriety, but I'm saying happiness through AA, more power to you. but it's kind of like saying keto is the only way to lose weight.
Right. I see.
AA has been the only system used for so long, but addiction in itself is such a new science that there's not a lot of data on it. It was named an illness, I believe, in 1987, and then finally deemed a disease in 1997.
Wow.
So it's still pretty much in its infancy as far as science goes. And I think there's room for new approaches. I think there's room for new ideas.
Not addiction as in like, oh, you mean as like a study?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. Wow. Because I'm just curious. I've always heard that like addiction's a disease.
People say it's genetic, which there are genetic factors, but
I did believe that a little bit because my dad was a big drinker, you know, in the military, and just he used to. I mean, he died at 50 from liver cancer.
Wow.
From drinking a ton,
Yeah.
you know? So I was like, you know, he did it. I'm going to do it too. What a stupid thing to say. But like, yeah, you know, when you're young and you're just shoving alcohol in your mouth, you're like, whatever. You're just
finding
like,
happiness.
You're kind of YOLO at that point. Did you have to, because I had to kind of cut off a lot of friends. Did you have to do that too? As far as your party buddies?
Yeah.
Yep.
And I love them all to death. I would never blame them for my choices, but influence is real.
Yeah, I mean, they're your choices. It's not really them, you know.
Right, it's not them.
Yeah. I don't blame my friends
down my throat.
Yeah, I don't blame in fact, I was sort of the instigator.
Yeah, so I was too.
You know, like I don't blame other people either.
Yeah, but I had
you had to kind of like.
I had to go less and stay for less time. You know.
Gotcha.
So I tried not to cut anybody out completely, but there for a few, and I was very lucky. The conditions of the world when I first started going sober, it was only a month before the world shut down and we weren't allowed to go out. So I was literally quarantining, and I had an excuse of why I didn't want to go anywhere, why I couldn't, you know, go.
Kind of forced to do it. Yeah.
I don't know if anybody here like hung out in secret, but like I had my friend group was like, you know, I know we're supposed to all be at home in groups of 6 or less, but do you want to come over? And I would just say that I was afraid of coronavirus.
Yeah.
But in all actuality, I was just trying to heal myself. I was trying to take time for myself. It wasn't so much about them as like I just needed to be in a peaceful environment.
Yeah. No. And they were cool. All of them
they were
cool
so
about
cool.
that.
Very,
That's
very
good.
cool. Yeah. If anybody makes fun of somebody trying to get better, whether that be fitness, nutrition, sobriety, whatever that might be, they're only making fun of you or making you feel bad because they're insecure about them not getting better themselves.
Yeah, no, totally. It's just that bully mentality.
It is, yeah, and their own insecurity.
So then when did you start your Magnify Maggie program?
Yeah. So
like after you got sober?
Well,
or was it like, did you find it then?
It was kind of that, like this whole experience of, well, when I was like 22, 23, I had some glimpses of healthy sobriety, happiness. And that's when I started journaling about it. I started thinking like, well, the gym is really healthy. What if I had like this concept that brings like nutrition and fitness together to make people happy so that they don't self-sabotage, drink, or do whatever is bad for them, you know? And then it was me actually investing in that coursework, in the professional development of that during quarantine, that kept my mind off of alcohol. One of my favorite quotes is, it's the prescription to any problem is to take your mind off of the problem and put it on the image you want to create. So instead of saying, I'm going to abstain from alcohol, I'm chasing sobriety, I can never drink again, because what does that do? That just gives you a bunch of free time to think about alcohol.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, I'm going to chase sobriety, I said, I'm going to chase some dreams that I've had for a while.
How do you combat like negative? Okay, so you're trying to rewire a person, right? And they have like these like habits. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Like they have these habits that they do every day, right? And then you're finally getting through them, right? You're finally like making progress. But how do you combat them watching things or consuming negative media or listening to the wrong things? Like, is that like, I can imagine that's a whole challenge in itself. It's
Yes.
Because what you consume visually, audio wise, your friends, your circle of friends, like how do you like
combat that?
Yeah. Is it just like start from within type of thing still?
It is.
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how in depth do we want to get
We can
here?
go a little bit more. Yeah, for sure.
So
I'm curious though.
Yeah. So what you explained is basically people using their external circumstances as excuses or as reasons in their mind. It's very valid reasons why they're not getting the right results. What they're watching, what they're consuming is negative, all of the sorts. But nobody can make you upset. Nobody can make you sad without your permission. I'm sure a lot of people have heard that before. But what's actually happening is that we're so programmed to take in the world through the outside. We forget that we can filter those thoughts, those ideas in our mind and say, I agree with this and I want to get emotionally invested, or I don't agree with this. I'm going to kick that idea right out of my consciousness. And so it's really about elevating your consciousness and being aware of, okay, if I entertain this thought and become emotionally invested in it, it's going to, whatever kind of frequency it is, positive or negative, it's going to produce the same type of result. So if somebody comes up to me and is giving me advice saying, you're not doing the right thing, you're not on the right path, if I'm not confident in my consciousness, I'm going to say that person's probably right. I'm probably doing some stupid stuff. But
so you're basically kind of rewiring them to kind of put like self-confidence in themselves.
Self-confidence is number one. And then courage to say, that person might have given me advice, but let me look at that person's results before I get emotionally invested. If that person told me that I'm doing wrong, but they're not doing very well in their life, then I don't need to actually
question what you're, don't just be a little sheep and just do your research, question, like, what does that person know?
Right. Yeah.
That's smart. A lot of people don't like to do that though.
A lot of people will just take somebody's word as,
for sure.
They'll just emotionalize it immediately. And what they don't know is when you become emotionally invested in something, it becomes your mind's target. So if it's a negative idea, your mind, like we said kind of at the beginning, if it's a negative idea, your mind is going to go to work to make sure that it affirms that through your entire reality.
Wow.
The subconscious mind is a crazy mofo.
How do you deal with overthinkers?
Well, first of all, we get into that thought audit.
I have a lot of friends or people that I know that are overthinkers that are self-admittedly overthinkers too. Yeah. And they're like, they ask me, how do I do so many things? I go, I don't think. I usually don't think about it. I like kind of just do it. Well,
you think about it, but you don't question. You don't weigh out the, like, oh, well, what if this bad thing happens? You just move in action.
I mean, I do play out the bad and the good, but I mean, I don't really care. I usually find joy in the process of learning. And so I think
that's the key.
Yeah.
Overthinkers typically, they aren't, and I don't mean this in a negative way, just from my experience, overthinkers typically won't try things. They won't experiment. They want to go off of everybody else's testimony. They want to research the pros and cons. They want to see, it's almost like they're looking for information to tell them it's okay not to do that thing. Don't go after your dream. It's okay to stay in your comfort zone. Or they're just using their imagination in the wrong direction.
Maybe it's a little fear too, right? A little bit of fear of just failing, right? And I think for me, and this took me a long time to realize because I'm 42 and I just kind of realized that failing it's probably like the last 5 years that I really looked at the word failing, and deconstructed my perception on it. And it's almost like, failing's a good thing because you're not going to know what to do, right? Like, it's almost like I don't know how to do something. And if I fail, it's not a bad thing. It's just now I know not what to do. Yeah, sort of that.
You almost learn more from a failing experience
100%
than you do from
I
success.
failed a ton. I failed so much. I get it.
Sometimes from a success, you can't pinpoint what it was.
It's hard to learn from like an easy win, right?
Exactly.
Because then you don't really get it. You're just like, oh, I got the reward and I don't really know how I got the reward, but I'm celebrating. Yeah.
Fitness really helped me accept failure as a positive thing because you have to push your body to failure, especially if you're like weight training, resistance training. you're not going to get substantial results unless you're taking every rep close to failure. Your muscles need to be broken down in order to rebuild like that. So kind of having the mindset where I was actually chasing failure in the gym made it more comfortable for me to experience failure in real life, where I would say, you know what, this is going to make me bigger and stronger. And now I freaking know.
Yeah. Now you know. Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. Wow. This is a good talk.
I know we went.
I feel like we can go on for a couple hours. Yeah. But like, okay. So let's plug where people can find you and tell me tell a little bit about your program and like where you want it to go and like, you know, plug your thing.
Thank you. I
don't know how to end these yet.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll get there. We'll get you a little tagline too.
Yeah.
So to find me on Instagram, Magnify Maggie. So Magnify just like the glass. Magnify Maggie, Maggie. Just started TikTok. That's
sweet.
I know.
Nice.
Magnify Maggie J. My last name is Jenson. And then on Facebook, Jenson. How you spell it, Maggie Jenson. But you can check out my website and see what I do with clients in the kind of harm reduction / moderation sobriety realm, magnifypw.com. And other than that, I think I did want to mention I have a little gift. Anybody on TikTok, if they want to go to my account, Magnify Maggie J, there's a link there. You can download an ebook that I have for you guys on habits and mindset and everything like that too.
That one's a good one. I'm going to check that out.
Thank
actually,
you.
Just because I'm curious.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Maggie. This was awesome. I feel like we need a part 2.
I know. We could probably have
stuff,
like part 3, part 4.
I'm curious to talk to your husband too. Like in the military, in the army.
I'd love
if he's
to.
Down to talk. I know a lot of military guys don't want to talk about
You might experience an even greater gift of gab from him. So just
Really?
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Maggie.
Thank you.
I don't know how to end these.
We'll do this again.
This is the end.
Yeah, the end.